Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Alexa and Friends. My name is Jeff Blankenburg, as always, and today I have the great honor of having Ian Freed here joining me from Bamboo Learning. Thanks for being here, Ian.
Thanks so much, Jeff. It's awesome to join you on your podcast.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. So one of the things that I really like to do when we start these episodes is to ask people questions that kind of give them a humanizing view, right? Gives the audience a little feel for who you are as a person. And so the first question I'd like to ask you, and you have not been prepared for these questions, is, lately there's been, over the last 10 or so years, there's been all these amazing superhero movies. And so I always like to ask people, if you could pick one specific superpower for yourself, anything you want, which one would you pick? And then, of course, I want to know why you picked that one.
Yeah, that's, I got to go with kind of the Spidey, ability to like shoot webs. And that goes, it's very old school. I used to watch the Spider-Man cartoon when I was a kid. And, seeing it now as part of the Avengers series, it makes it that much more fun. So I guess, it almost allows Spider-Man to fly. Obviously he can trap bad guys and stuff like that. So sure. I got to go with the Spider-Man.
Sure. Now, I like that one a lot. I was a big Spider-Man fan as a kid as well. Well, one of the things that is always interesting, and someone was talking about this on another one, they wanted the ability to fly, but they recognized that they didn't get all the other superpowers that come with the need to fly. Like, Superman's impervious to almost anything, and so he can fly at super fast speeds. If you could fly at super fast speeds but didn't have the skin to protect you, all of a sudden, like, your skin burning up and stuff. And so what came to mind when you said the ability to shoot the spider webs and stuff is, does he have the upper body strength for that? Because my goodness, that would be really hard to manage. But I think it's a good one. I think it has a lot of practical use just in regular life as well too. So you see all the little sideways ways Spider-Man will use his web slinging ability.
Yeah, totally. I personally probably do not have the upper body strength. But I also do remember Spider-Man being, he was pretty buff. So yeah. Spider-Man clearly did. So I agree with you. I might not have the combination of skills if I can only pick one.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So the next one requires a little storytelling. And it's really just a choice to be made. But I always love to get into the thought process that you go through to do it. So I want you to imagine for a moment that you're in a dense city, a metropolis of some kind, and you're on 7th Street, and you're going to a restaurant. You're meeting a friend at a restaurant that's on 8th Street. It's one block over. And in a normal process, you would just walk down all the way around the block to whatever intersection there is. And but as you're walking, you notice there's an alley that leads right to the restaurant you want to go to, right? You can see it through that alley, and you're like, well, it's a bright lit day. There's no danger here. It'll be fine. So you walk down the alley, and as you get about halfway, at the end that you're heading towards, you encounter a large horse-sized duck, like just a big duck, right? And he doesn't look super friendly. He doesn't look like he necessarily wants to let you pass of your own free will. So you turn around as any smart human would and say, I'm just going to go the long way, only to discover that end has been closed by 100 duck-sized horses. So a bunch of tiny horses. All right. So now the quandary for you is, which end do you head towards, thinking you have the best success of escaping?
Wow, that's a good one. I'm first of all, I'm a little afraid of all animals, including like little dogs. So this is like among my worst nightmares. So I guess I would go to the big duck end. Because I think like the notion of getting past 100 little horses, that's just frightening to me. So I guess I would try to somehow deke around, like maybe if I could pick up a rock or a brick. I grew up in Chicago, so there were often bricks in the alley.
There's bricks available, right?
Just something to like distract the one big duck and make it like throw it left and go right or something like that. I don't know. I think it wouldn't work, and I'd be dead and terrified.
But if you had that spiderweb ability, maybe you could like zip his mouth shut or something. That would totally help me. I would absolutely need Spider-Man powers. Yeah. Well, I did not realize that I was introducing you to a nightmare with this story for that. But I'm glad you're here. And the next thing that I'd really like to get into is kind of your background. So we're going to spend plenty of time talking about Bamboo and some of the cool stuff that you guys are doing there. But I'd love to know kind of how you got to Bamboo. Where did you start in college? What was your major? And what were kind of some of the business or life choices you made that kind of led you to the path that you're on today?
Yeah, well, the challenge for this type of question is I don't run on too long. So by all means, cut me off, Jeff.
No, we have no shortage of time, man. This is my favorite part of the entire interview. So please.
Absolutely. So I will actually go back to high school because when I was in high school, computers, basically the first personal computers just showed up one day. And at the time they were Commodore PETs. This is even before the Apple II existed. And I was just walking by the hallway and I saw them in there, and a couple of people who I didn't know that well. And I just walked in and kind of asked what they were doing. And that began a really interesting kind of discovery with 2 or 3 friends, the folks who were in there who I didn't know at the beginning, just like teaching each other how to code. In the only language on the Commodore PET was BASIC. So, it was pretty simple. And I loved math. And so I think that it kind of made it relatively easy for me. So when college came around, I had an interesting conversation with my dad. I was like, well, maybe I should major in computer science or math or something like that. And he's like, don't major in computer science because you can always pick that up. You can read a book or something, and you also like physics, and you're not going to pick up a book in physics and learn it. And so I majored in physics, and I love my dad. I mean, he passed away a couple of years ago, but and his advice was often really good. I'm not sure his advice in this instance was that good because even though I could code, I'm not, like, compared to many of the folks I've met in my career, I'm not a coder. I'm not, and maybe I would have been. So it's not a big regret because my career has been amazing. But so I majored in physics. I barely did any computer science in college, a little bit. But when college was over, I actually started just writing software. I'd done a little bit in high school, and my mom ran a business. And so I wrote some of the software for her. And I just got pretty good at it. I mean, I was very kind of pragmatic, not great computer scientist, but I could just get stuff done.
Sure.
That helped businesses. So anyway,
a good programmer, someone that can get things done.
Yeah. I mean, it helped.
I don't have the foundation in computer science either. But I've made a career of being able to do just enough with code to make it successful. So
yeah, and one little funny thing, which I'll come back around to, is it actually relates to Bamboo Learning. But so I'll try to kind of skip some big steps. But I wound up doing a lot of work in Chicago for political campaigns, writing software for political campaigns, because it's another significant interest of mine, just politics and the way government works and public policy. So I did that, running my own company for about 3 years. Went to grad school actually in public policy, where I studied science, technology, and public policy. And I found the internet while I was in grad school. And this was 1989. So for those of you who weren't yet born, Netscape did not exist. There was no such thing as an internet browser for about 5 more years. But I was sending email, teaching classes on how to use file transfer and stuff like that all over the world. I went to Mexico to help train professors there about how to use the internet. And what I wound up doing after grad school was start my own company again. And I actually had a pretty significant team in Russia right when Russia was privatizing. And this was after the Soviet Union fell apart. And we actually set up a network in about 35 Russian cities to be able to allow people to bid for assets in Russia using an IP network. It was a private internet protocol network because the internet was, like, in Russia, it didn't really exist. So
built your own internet.
Yeah, it was super early. So anyway, I had probably about 30 people in Russia working for me. We did a tremendous amount of work for about 4 years. And then there were a bunch of political issues in Russia. So we had to it became really dangerous, actually. So we eventually had to pull out and kind of shut that business down. Then I found Real Networks, one of the pioneers in audio and video on the internet.
Yeah.
I worked there for
Real Player.
Yeah, Real Player. I ran something called the Real Broadcast Network, which was it was actually kind of like AWS for audio and video in the really early days. People would essentially rent time from Real Networks on our network to be able to broadcast. So like Disney, Merrill Lynch, and a bunch of other customers were on our network. And then what later then led a team to build Real Player into mobile phones. And so this is pre-iPhone. So they're like Nokia was the leading cell phone provider. We had a Real Player and Nokia phones. And so that really started my complete interest in computing devices that were not PCs. So phones, set-top boxes, a bunch of other things like that. After a few years doing that, I came to Amazon and met Steve Kessel and was working on a project that we pitched to Bezos, which he loved, actually. And we were heading down that path. And one day we got a slightly embarrassed, slightly uncomfortable phone call from Tom Skutak, who was the CFO at the time, basically telling us, even though it had been approved and we were moving forward, we had to shut it down. So that was disappointing.
Wow. Yeah.
But I got I was helping Steve out with something in New York, and he called me up and he's like, "Hey, Jeff would like you to be his TA." And so I was like, "What's a TA?"
Right.
So that I learned about it, and I was Bezos's third TA after Andy Jassy and Colin Breyer. And so I wound up doing that for a year, and it was amazing. I learned so much from Jeff. He says I helped Amazon, and that's always flattering. There were a few things I think I helped in terms of allowing the company to scale a little better, but did that, and then Jeff and Steve asked me to move over and run Kindle on the business side. So I ran Kindle, which was incredible from the very not the very beginning, but a year before we launched. So really the beginning of the business side of Kindle. Did that for about 4 years, then started running new devices, which included Echo and Alexa, Fire Phone. We actually incubated Fire TV, but it was like that many projects for me, even as a VP, even with a team eventually of 2,500 people, I'm like, I can't do 3 brand new products. So handed that off, which was, great product. Launched Fire Phone. That was not a wild success. It's okay. Ran Echo and Alexa. And then a few other things at Amazon after doing a little sabbatical, and then started Bamboo Learning. So that's, I could go on and on and on, but we have other stuff to cover.
I think that's a great story, though. And, honestly, people ask me all the time about the Fire Phone, and I got here just after that had kind of gone its way.
Yeah.
But I think that there's so much interesting learning that comes out of a project like that. Yes, it wasn't successful, and that's fine, because there was still a lot of technology and learning and information that we gathered that made other products more successful. And I think even in its demise, I think that there was still a lot of good that came from that project.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I had. Obviously, we all wanted it to be successful, but some of the early thinking on some of the voice product stuff that obviously wound up in Echo and Alexa was really happening in a couple different places around the company. But like the music integration, I think we had a pretty good idea that would work really well because of some things we've done with Fire Phone. The other one that's super interesting that I think is one of these unintended consequences, that we had to have really great maps. We couldn't license Google Maps for a bunch of business reasons. And we had the sort of advantage of Apple launching their own maps and trying to kick out Google as the default map provider. And Apple was a disaster. Like, it literally would send cars to the end of a road and like it would just be a cliff. And I don't think anybody died, but like a lot of people got lost. So we kind of had the advantage of seeing that and knowing how to kind of not make some of the mistakes that Apple did in the early days of their Maps product. And it was pretty complicated platform, but that whole team wound up going on to completely new things in Amazon. Many different important features in Amazon. For example, like something you would never expect, I never would have guessed, the routing that drivers take for Prime Now. A lot of the Maps team, and they knew how to do routing and things like that. So a lot of that team went to go help the Prime Now team to help figure out the best path for drivers. And there's a bunch of other things. So you're totally right. It was disappointing, but Jeff and others said, look, we swung the bat. It was a big risk. We take big risks at the company all the time. And, that's sometimes risks pan out and they're wildly successful, and sometimes they're not. And even the ones that don't work, I think the best of them, you've hired a great team, and they go on to many other, sometimes very related things, and sometimes not related at all.
Well, I think even if you'd asked somebody 10 years ago, hey, we have this idea for a product. It's a live microphone in everyone's house. I think they all would have looked at you like you were crazy.
Yeah.
You take that risk, you roll out a device that has a ton of utility and functionality that people want, and all of a sudden it's like, there's 100 million of these now?
Right.
That's just mind-blowing to me.
Yeah. No, I don't think anyone, either, obviously, Alexa and Echo are even bigger than Kindle, but for both products, we were massively surprised by the uptake, the speed of the uptake, and the level of interest.
Right.
But yeah, 100 million there are not, like, if you look in the history of devices, the number of devices where there's 100 million installed base ever is pretty small.
Yeah.
And if you think about how long it took for Alexa to have 100 million plus installed base, it was, if not the fastest, like probably one of the top 2 or 3 devices in the history of the world.
Yeah, I have a really good slide that I created probably 5 years ago now, and it shows technology and their pace. I don't think it was 100 million, but there was maybe it was 10 million users. I don't remember what the final number was, but it showed things like radio and television and just the adoption of these technologies. And voice was so much faster than than PCs, than television, than video, than anything. It was quite remarkable.
Yeah,
I think it's easier to adopt things these days too, so that we have that advantage. But you think back to when people were, am I going to buy a $500 television when there's one show on a day or something, Yeah,
right. And literally, like, if you go back into the history of new inventions, I think people, like, when the first radios came out, like, somebody on the block would get a radio, and 5 or 6 friends on either side would come at night to hear, like, the 3 radio broadcasts, come to their house and listen to the one radio on the block. That's how things kind of so it was all word of mouth, and then people had to be convinced, do I want my own radio, or should I just go to my friends? So it's very different now.
Very different. But I still see a lot of that. I mean, obviously, you can see behind me here, I have a ton of our devices as part of my testing lab, but people still do that kind of thing, right? They're like, hey, I know you have a bunch of those cool Alexa devices. Can I come over and check them out? Yeah. And it's the same kind of word of mouth. They want to see it. They want to feel it. They want to know how it all works before they spend their own money.
Yeah, I actually have a funny Kindle story about that, if you're interested.
Let's hear it.
So you have to, set the Wayback Machine for 2007. Amazon has never shipped a device that it built itself. And we start shipping Kindle, and it sells out immediately. And then it was right before Christmas. So, but then got back in stock in February. And we're obviously at that point trying to sell as many as we can and build as many as we can. And we kept getting this feedback, like, I just want to see it. I'm uncomfortable, going to Amazon and buying it without ever seeing it.
Right.
And so the team and I got together to just think about a way to solve that problem. And we came up with this idea called See a Kindle in Your City. And all we did was we listed the top 10 cities and created a forum, and there was like an underlying Amazon system to have forums. And we just said, if you have a Kindle or you want to see a Kindle in, New York, LA, Chicago, Houston, blah, 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 just arrange to meet here. That's all we did.
Oh my
and
God.
Within like 2 days, we had all these people saying, yeah, I'll meet you at the, Starbucks here, the local coffee shop. And so we're like, so I had a bet after 2 days with a guy named Jay Marine, who's still at Amazon. And my bet, it wasn't like serious money or anything. I don't think, maybe it was like a dinner or something. My bet was we would turn it on to 30 cities within a week. And I think Jay was like, it's going to take a month. And so I won the bet.
I love that, man. That's a great story. So, okay. So you got into Amazon. Obviously you've had an impact on a lot of devices. You got to work right with Jeff Bezos for a year. So you've had a pretty storied career inside Amazon. So what was the impetus? What was the thing that moved you from all of the things that you were doing at Amazon to, hey, I want to create this voice business, this Bamboo Learning?
Yeah. A few things. One, I had left Amazon really without knowing exactly what I would do. And I love and still love the company. I just had been there for quite a while and I just wanted to try something new. Sure. And so I had been involved in helping some education nonprofits really to try to diversify technology to a broader audience at a really young age. There's a group in Seattle called the Technology Access Foundation. It's a great organization. And then I also, as I mentioned early, I started sort of my career writing software. And I sort of stepped back and I thought, I haven't actually written a single line of code in like 20 to 25 years. So I thought, I just want to try coding again. I didn't know which language to use, which platform, I didn't know anything. And I thought, well, I'll just, I love Alexa. I think it's a great, interesting platform. Let me just try to code up an Alexa skill. And so I started playing with it really pretty early on. This is like 2017. And I was able to get a basic math, like addition, subtraction, arithmetic sort of, here's the problem, guess the answer, that kind of thing going. And then I wound up talking to my co-founder, Irina Fine. This is before Bamboo existed. And Irina and I knew each other from Russia. She was born and raised in the Soviet Union and worked for me in Russia in the 90s. But she's been in education for 30 years. And I said, hey, do you know this thing called Alexa? I think it could be a really cool tool to help kids learn in an exciting and new way. Why don't you check it out? So I just sent her one. I said, here, take it. And then, by the way, try this math skill that I did. And so she also is trained in classical music and classical music performance. Nice. So we had this idea to build what became Bamboo Music. And the idea of Bamboo Music was introduce how music works to kids, how do chords work, how do notes work, what's tempo, what do different instruments sound like. And so still, the company didn't exist. And I start writing the software in Python using AWS, and I'm still so clueless. But Irina has a certain I guess I would call it persistence about her. And so every time I would get stuck, she'd say, well, just keep trying. And so I did. And I kept thinking like, okay, if we're actually going to start a real company, like we need a real software developer to do this, not me. So anyway, we're in parallel also looking for somebody to head our engineering team. And I wound up coding the whole thing and showed it to you guys at Amazon. I think I showed it to Steve Rubishin, and he thought it was really cool. Steve used to run the Alexa third-party team. And so we shipped it. And, before we shipped it, we founded the company. We had to make it official for a bunch of reasons. And then a couple months later, we found Michael Nail, who's another former Amazon leader who is a real engineering leader. And so we started thinking about math and books and a bunch of other things. But when Michael first started talking to me, I said, Michael, just look at my code for Bamboo Music. And if you can use any of it, great. But no offense if you can't, no problem. So I figured, Michael take a couple hours, look at it, blah, blah, blah. So he emails me back like 10 minutes later. And he's like, Ian, it's awesome that it's working. I think from now on, you should just stick to the business side. So, so I took the hint, right. But to this day, Bamboo Music is still running, which, as Michael even points out, like, hey, if it works, like it's fine. So.
Oh, that's great. All right. So let's talk about Bamboo. Do you want to talk about kind of the big picture? What you think about your company is these days and kind of what your mission is?
Yeah, absolutely. So Bamboo Learning is really our mission is to deliver learning solutions for anyone in any language using voice-based products. And right now we're really focused on kindergarten through 5th grade. So think of kids about age 5 to age 11 in English. A little more U.S. focused, although we have launched in English in up to 100 countries. And the idea is both that learning through listening and speaking is a kind of discipline that we all use, if you think about it, all the time. But it's kind of under, there aren't a lot of tools other than humans interacting to allow kids to practice any of this stuff.
Right.
So for example, when you get math homework, it's a worksheet, or maybe it's on a tablet and you're like tapping things. So it's basically visual and in some cases tactile. I had an interesting math teacher in grade school and high school who, in addition to all the normal math stuff you do, he would also periodically ask us to perform a mental calculation in front of the class, and he would ask the problem. And that became a very helpful exercise for being like both quick at calculation and also like good at mental estimation. So if you do a calculation and your math is like, well, that doesn't even make sense. Like he would sort of train us, then something went wrong in the calculation. So, so I think because of that background, it occurred to me, yeah, we could do this in math. As Arena and I started talking, we could do this for listening comprehension, which is a really important language arts skill. And if you think about what kids really need to learn in grades K through 5, there's an old, like probably from the 30s or 40s, reading, writing, arithmetic. It's sort of the 3 R's, even though, writing it's not actually 3 R's, but sure. So that is really the core to our products. Okay. Bamboo Learning offers, and we've launched 7. I can kind of get into the details of the product, but the main thing to say is our latest product, which we call Bamboo Learning, incorporates listening comprehension, language arts, which includes spelling, grammar, vocabulary, and phonics, as well as math. And so you can kind of get everything in one with the latest product.
I like that. I know we have a video we could actually show kind of what that
cool. Yeah, that'd be great.
But before we get to that, you raised an interesting point. So I have found that I am also quite good at, we'll call it basic math, right? Adding 2-digit numbers, being able to multiply things, doing like that stuff just comes pretty naturally to me. And I've run an interesting experiment online before where I asked people on Twitter or Facebook or whatever to add 2-digit numbers together. And I don't care what your answer is. What I want to know is, how did you get your answer? Like, what was the method, the path by which you get that, right? It'll be like 44 and 57 or something. And it's so interesting to me as you ask a large group of people how they solve that kind of problem, how many different ways there are to those kinds of problems. Do you guys have like a rubric, like a path that you think about, like this is the way that people should learn? Is that something that your team is bringing to the table, or is it more driven by how best works for the student?
Yeah, there is an underlying rubric and an underlying philosophy, which really comes from Irina Fine, who's my co-founder, her 30 years in education. And so all of these different subject areas, we have grade level specific questions or activities. And they also start really simple, as if you were doing it in September. And if you think about it, like, let's say you're in first grade. In September, you're going to learn certain things, let's say, how certain rhyming words work. And, you might start with simple ones like up and pup, and then it gets more complicated. So the main point is, in September, you're learning the most basic thing. In October, you're learning the next thing. And the way teachers think of this is units. We kind of hide all that complexity. And what we do is we allow kids and parents to just start at a particular grade level. It doesn't have to be the grade level that you actually attend in school. Right. And then everything is self-paced, not only by subject, but within each, what we call a sub-discipline. So language arts includes spelling, grammar, vocabulary, and phonics. If you're really, really good at phonics, which is things like rhyming and how words sound, you might progress, let's say, from first grade to second grade, even to third grade. And if you're not the best speller, you're going to keep working on that first grade spelling activity. That makes sense. And so the overall curriculum, and in some ways the rubric, the lessons we offer are very much building on the lessons we previously offered. And once you master them, we give you the next harder thing. So it's not as subtle as what you're talking about, I would say, and as yet as in some ways sophisticated as the question about, how many different ways did people handle that question, what's 44 plus 57? By the way, I kind of know that 44 plus 56 is 100. So I just like, what gets me to 100 and what's left? That's how I did that one, just in my head. But over time, the really interesting thing is we envision really fascinating machine learning tools. So what that means is we might find sets of kids who answer certain questions really, really easily and then get stuck in certain other areas. And if we get them unstuck, kids like them that come after them, we might be able to get unstuck in a different way than other kids who didn't have a sticking point on that particular question, or that type of calculation or activity. The best example of this is negative numbers in math. So what's 7 minus 4? If you can do subtraction, everyone's like, oh, that's 3. Once you get that, it's not. But then you say, what's 4 minus 7? And a lot of kids are like, I don't know. There's no answer. But other kids are like, oh, well, that's not, it's less than 0. And then you have to do things like, well, imagine that 0 is the surface of the swimming pool. And if you're above the swimming pool on the ladder, that's, let's say plus 7. Yeah. And then if you dive down and you're below the water, so all those things where kids have different ways of mastering it, you could eventually throw a machine learning algorithm at that and get kids unstuck based on really the large number of questions that we're able to kind of keep track of anonymously, by the way. Of course. So we are not doing that yet, but there's a lot of research in this area, and we'd like to take advantage of it at some point.
I love that. So I know I have a video sample of one of your reading comprehension examples.
Cool.
So here, let me show that to the gang here real quick.
Alexa, open Bamboo Learning.
Great to see you, Tiger. Would you like word games, math, or books?
Books.
Some books I have are The Talking Turtle, Balto the Sled Dog, and Robin's Best Nest. Which would you like?
Balto the Sled Dog.
Great.
In the winter of 1925, a call went out over the radio. Please help, said Dr. Curtis Welch. People in our town are very sick. Some of them are dying. We are out of medicine. Dr. Welch lived in Nome, Alaska. There was medicine in Anchorage, but that was very far away.
Why did Dr. Curtis Welch put a call out over the radio?
He needed help.
Well done!
Awesome. Very, very good. So it forces, at least in that example, they have to listen to the story. They have to actually understand and comprehend what's happening there, and then be able to answer questions about the content they were given. That's great.
Yeah, that's right. That one was a fairly advanced. That would probably be at least a 9 or 10-year-old for that one. And I'm pretty sure that came from our partner Highlights, that is a publisher of Highlights magazine that's been around for probably decades and decades. So one of the interesting things that we've been really, really good at, and it's taken us a while to figure out. You noticed the answer to the question was a full sentence. And we can accept full sentences, partial sentences, one-word answers. And doing that turns out to be, especially with wide open-ended questions around a specific book, that is not that easy to do.
No, I have to imagine, just to get a little technical here for everybody, I have to imagine you're doing some kind of fuzzy matching on the back end to be able to say, here are the words that I received, and do these even resemble a possible answer based on a catalog you have?
Yeah, there's some of that. There's some kind of fancy wizardry with some of the Alexa Skills Kit, some of which is quite proprietary on our end, so I can't go into tons of details about that. But it is using some pretty advanced features of ASK, and we've just been working at it for a while, so we kind of know what works and what. Believe me, we've had a lot of failure along the way. We haven't released it to the public, but we've been like, everything's working, and then all of a sudden the model doesn't understand really anything. We're like, okay, what did we do wrong?
And that's why a good set of robust tests really help you understand how I just broke everything.
That's right.
That's great. There was a question from the audience actually that's interesting, and that was: is there a reason you used a recorded voice to read the story as opposed to just using Alexa's voice?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we found, we test a lot with kids, and what we found is that over a certain length of a sentence, or not just one sentence, but once you get into 2 or 3 sentence kind of narratives, it's pretty hard to pay attention whether you're a child or an adult, actually. And so while it would be in some ways much easier to do everything with Alexa, we tried that, and really at this stage of text to speech, it's just not quite good enough to capture all the expressions, especially. I think I would say especially for kids. This particular story is nonfiction, so arguably it's a little bit drier, and you maybe could get away with it. But if you're reading Little Red Riding Hood, you don't want Alexa reading Little Red Riding Hood.
And I assume you guys have probably played with poly voices too, and it's kind of the same problem. We've get that like nuanced feeling on words.
Yeah, it's I think just in the time since I started working on Alexa, obviously. All the voices have gotten way better. The different poly voices give you the ability to do different variety. But the expression in the context of a story, like I'll give you a good example. When let's say Little Red Riding Hood, like when the wolf comes in to the story, and it's
spoiler alert for everybody. If you haven't read Little Red Riding Hood, that's a story for you.
That's good. When the wolf comes in, it's scary, right?
Yeah.
And so, right now there isn't an SSML tag for like scary voice, at least that I know of.
No.
And you want the scary, you want some of that kind of tension when the wolf comes in, and you want the glee. Let's say when another spoiler alert, Little Red Riding Hood escapes or doesn't get eaten by the wolf. So there's just all those little nuances actually really drive a story. And I think eventually, I don't know if it's 10 or 15 years from now, but eventually it may be that I'll just call them synthetic voices can do a lot more of that.
Yeah.
And, we'll obviously keep an eye on it. And if we can do Alexa reading stories, it'd be better for us. But
there are some services I've seen, and obviously the Samuel L. Jackson example is a good one, where they've gone about as far as they can today with synthesizing Samuel's voice. But I have seen services out there that'll let you try to synthesize your own even. Interesting. I would love to be able to use my voice in things without having to record all the audio. But I'm with you. I think that there's still that nuance. There's a big difference between the way that I speak, right, that has like I carry emotion through words, and it's really hard to program that, even as much as you can mark up and tweak the SSML.
Yeah, and over time, I mean, maybe especially with all the machine learning that can be thrown at some of these issues, you could read a bunch of scary stories with great narrators. And over time, like I'm sure that Alexa's voice or other voices could start to mimic that. If you told it, mimic the scary voice.
Right. Agreed. All right. So we've started talking about the future a little bit, and I think this is the thing that we can take another 15 minutes with or so. There's two specific things I'd like to ask. So the first thing relates to Bamboo Learning. So without giving away a roadmap or any kind of thing that people may want to compete with you around, what does the future look like for you guys? Where are your next steps? I know you said you just recently released this new version, but I'd love to know more about kind of, what's your big picture? Where do you see it going 5 years from now? Do you see it in schools? Like what's the big plan?
Yeah. I mean, one thing that we're already starting to see, so this is much sooner than 5 years, we're getting a lot more interest from teachers in schools. And I think in some ways the pandemic kind of alerted schools and teachers to the notion that a lot of the existing tools that they sort of thought they had available for at-home learning don't actually work that well. And I think we all know that kids were just like kids and adults, we were all exhausted with screen time. Yeah. And so the notion that you could mix that up with a voice only experience is just, I think, generally attractive to schools, but also particularly around some of the things we're doing where the answers are really open-ended, and that we're able to do that very accurately. I think that's quite interesting to schools, because if you think about it, like a really good example of why it's tricky to do the open-ended, like if we ask that Balto question, you can do it on a worksheet. Like, somebody can write in the answer on a physical, and if you're 9 or 10 or 11, you could type it into an iPad, let's say. Right. But if you're 5, like you don't have the keyboard skills or the, like your finger typing thing, like you can't do it, but you know the answer and you can speak it. And the only alternative to that would be kind of giving away the answer and saying, which one of these 4 is the answer? Well, then you just gave, like, it's no longer the same exercise. Right. So I think one thing is fairly soon, I think you'll see us not actually necessarily in schools, but used by schools for kids to do at home. And there's a bunch, if you think about a school environment, and either it's really quiet and you don't want kids talking because everybody's kind of working at their desk, or it can be kind of noisy, which isn't the best environment for Alexa if there's a lot of background noise. Right. So we actually continue to think the best physical location for this is at home. But what we've seen from the pandemic is many, many more schools are wanting kids to supplement what they're doing at home. So that's kind of very short term. Longer term, and I'm going to go to the opposite extreme, like in education, how will voice be used? The way I think about it long term is whether you're 5 through 11 or middle school or high school or college or an adult, imagine you could go to Alexa or, any voice assistant and just, I'll use Alexa though, because it's easier for me to think about. Alexa, I'd like to learn some more math. That's a pretty simple command. It could be, Alexa, I'd like to learn about physics, or Alexa, I'd like to learn about European history between World War I and World War II. All of those different things. You can get as general or specific as you want. And then the cool thing is, if the learning platform knows about you, so let's take my math example. I'd like to learn some more math. If the learning platform knows about you, it can say, okay, well, you've been struggling with geometry, and you're moving so fast in probability. Would you like to work on something that's been difficult for you, or something, would you like to work on geometry? Because it's a weakness. I mean, with a 5-year-old, you're not going to say a weakness, but with me, you could say, yep, your geometry is not good, Ian. So you need, and I could either say yes, I could say, yes, let's work on geometry. Or, is there probability that's related to topology? So you could have like a conversation about your learning.
Yeah.
It could be highly customized.
I like that.
I think is super, to me, that's like absolutely fascinating and cool.
And this leads me to the future that I'm trying to paint for everybody ever, which is, I'm going to ask a question. I don't know if you've thought about it. And as a company that ultimately owns the data, right? You know the leveling for each of your students.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things in the future that I want is this kind of, and keep in mind, this is all with the idea of security and privacy and trust being baked into all of this. But the idea of there being kind of a universal context object that exists for every person everywhere. And I'm carrying around some context about my math skills, right? So I'm really good at geometry and calculus, but I'm not especially good at, I don't know, some other kind of math. And so I carry that around. So not only can your system recognize that and say, oh, you know what, you've never been to Bamboo before, but based on what we can find about you, based on your universal context, it looks like you actually have been focusing on trying to learn a lot more geometry. Can we help you dig in deeper on that, right?
Yep.
But then taking that a step further, now we're talking about not just your math skills, but we're talking about your preferences, your likes and dislikes, what kind of foods you prefer, right? As you walk into a restaurant, they already kind of know what they should offer you. And then to take that a step further, one of the examples I love to share is, especially as we're coming out of this pandemic, I miss so many of my friends, and I haven't seen them obviously in a long time. But as an adult, especially I feel like this is even harder for adult men, like to have like real friends that you get together with on a regular basis. I wanted to be able to know who my friends are, what my network looks like, and be able to say, hey, you and Ian are getting together on Friday at this bar that's convenient for both of you. And like neither of us called each other or planned it. It's just like on my calendar all of a sudden. That kind of stuff sounds amazing to me, because you know how hard it can be to like compare schedules, and then something's free and then they're not free. Something came out with the kids. Like it's just impossible. And so taking that all the way back, like I think that there's something very interesting about the idea of having a universally branded skill set, right, across a number of learning materials, whether that's math or English or history or whatever, and being able to share that not only within your system, but also across any educational platform. So that when I walk into some place, I can be like, yeah, here's where I'm at. And they can easily, kind of adjust and refine my educational experience with them too. What are your thoughts on that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, you said a lot there. So I have a few different thoughts. I mean, one, I think that sort of universal context idea is a really, really cool one. The only I have two thoughts that are mini cautions. Maybe one's more of a big caution, but it's totally, in my opinion, totally solvable. As long as you have the user's permission,
right,
it's all good. And I think one of the flaws really broadly in the software industry is the way we currently get the user's permission is we have an 80-page license agreement, and you have to say yes. And then you've given permission to 80 pages worth of stuff that the company can do. Our license agreement is not 80 pages, by the way. It's still longer than I would want it to be. But so I actually think there needs to be sort of like legislative reform that just says like, no, actually, if you can have your 80 pages, but you need to explain in plain English in 3 sentences what this actually means. So I think, we strive to do that at our company. And I think we'll keep getting better at that. So users not only need to give their permission, some of these license agreements, you're sort of a little bit held hostage. And I'm not at all casting blame on Amazon at all.
No, I
think there are many, many other companies that, but the whole industry, like go if you want to get really bored, go look at 10 license agreements from software companies you've heard of, and maybe they won't be 80 pages, but they're going to be more than anyone wants to read. So that's my personal, okay. So, but let's say we've explained in plain English, yes, we want this Ian Fried, agree that this universal context should be available to me, to people, to companies that can help me solve things I want to solve. So let's assume I say yes to that. And I see a huge value in that. The other caution I have is there should be a serendipity algorithm, which means, you have your set of friends and you might make new friends. And all those people go into your meet somebody in a bar for a drink, automated meeting scenario. But there should also be the thing where, you were in a conversation with a group of 6 people at a conference, and you actually didn't introduce yourself to all 6 people just because somebody came in late. And so could the serendipity engine say, oh yeah, that 6th person who you don't actually have a relationship with, maybe you both have to acknowledge, but it would say, hey, Jeff, you and Sarah are interested in this topic. You guys actually might have met at this conference and you're in the same city. Would you like to meet each other? Yep. So, or, in our case, let's say we've tried a bunch of different math with somebody and they've never tried topology. Well, sometimes we should just randomly pick something that you haven't had a history of being interested in, because otherwise I think we're in this broader sort of danger through social media that we're only reading and watching the things that we're exposed to, which is all algorithmic. So it's like self-reinforcing these
living in your
silos.
Right.
So I think somebody should go build a serendipity engine, by the way.
I love that term. So let me give you a quick backstory, because where this idea came from, this universal context, I was, before I joined Amazon, which was right when the first Alexa came out, first Echo came out. I was working at a healthcare startup, and we were trying to solve the one patient record problem. If you've ever been a patient, you know that this is a huge problem.
Yeah.
Every doctor has a different record of you, and they own the record. So you can call and request permission to access it or whatever. And I think that's a lot of how we treat our software today. And so the model we were moving towards was that the user themselves, through mobile apps and other things, they actually own their data. And when you go to a new doctor, you can choose what information you want to send that individual doctor. But if you're going to a psychiatrist, you don't necessarily need to show oh yeah, I broke my arm last year. They don't care about that at all.
Right.
So I'm not going to share that part of my medical record. I'm only going to share the stuff that's relevant and useful to them. And it made me think about how you could broaden that to be so many other things. Right now, it's not just a patient record. Now it's a you record.
Yeah.
And inside there is, I really like pizza and I really hate cauliflower. Right. And so as you continue to grow that thing out, you as the owner of that data, not Facebook, not any of these other entities, you decide who accesses it and what, in what ways. But I think there's something to that for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a huge idea. I mean, I'll give you another example, kind of specific to learning. So, we're doing listening comprehension, and then we're also doing language arts, right? And so you can imagine we, over time, can know areas of vocabulary that, let's say, a particular child doesn't know, but is making good progress. And then if we knew, because the parents of that child gave us permission to know which books that child liked, we could introduce sort of books similar to the books they liked that had stretch vocabulary words.
Oh, nice.
So that would be, think of that. So high likelihood the child will be interested in the book. And also those stretch vocabulary words are going to come up in the context of something that they hopefully really love.
Yeah.
And we can go back, and then we'll know, okay, well, let's quiz this child on those vocabulary words in this context that, they're probably riveted, and see how they do. And if they do great, then we can do it again and find another book that they might really like. And then of course we have to flip in the serendipity engine. So there's a book who knows if they'll like it, but we'll try that too. Right. But I think that that's very powerful. And we could never, we're not a company that, knows everything a child would read. Right. I mean, Amazon's a company that might know that. It's a little bit tricky because parents are buying it for kids or grandparents. But anyway, so if the family gave us permission to, in the context of that child's sort of record, know which books they liked, then that would allow us to create a better, more customized learning experience for them. So, but to your point, if the family owned the record, right, then they could decide how great they want the learning experience to be.
Exactly. Agreed. Well, this has been fantastic. I didn't realize that we're almost out of time, but this has been a great conversation. I'm happy to pick your brain today. Before we wrap up here, I don't know if you know, but we have a group of Alexa champions. These are people that are across the industry that are doing all sorts of interesting things, whether they're developers or content creators or just have a big voice in the world of voice. And one of them, who's been a guest on here before, her name is Julie Daniel Davis.
Yeah, we know Julie.
Okay. I was thinking, man, if you guys haven't crossed paths, it would be very imperative that you do meet her. But if you know Julie, that's great.
Yeah, no, Julie's awesome. She's done a few podcasts with me and Arena. And then I think she just did another one maybe about 2 weeks ago with Arena talking about Bamboo Learning, the new Bamboo Learning Alexa skill. So yeah, Julie's terrific. She's, made that transition from full-time educator to educator with great experience in and around voice. Yeah. She does her own she's awesome. But thank you for.
Awesome. But she's a really passionate voice about voice and education.
Yeah.
And I love being able to tune in and hear what her thoughts are on stuff, and in the same way that we've been able to share our stuff today. So with that, I think we're gonna wrap up here. Is there anything else that you wanted to share before we close things out here?
I think this has been great, Jeff. Really enjoyed it. It's really fun to kind of both go through the journey of my kind of interest and an experience around voice, and then give us a chance to talk a little bit about Bamboo Learning. I'm really proud of the company. We've come an incredibly long way. And so I just encourage people to try it, which is pretty easy to do. You can go to our website or just, can I say the Alexa command? So we'll start firing off Alexas everywhere.
Well, I did just put your URL here on the screen. Learning.
That's great.
And, we try not to set devices off. And then I'll throw this on the screen. I think we can still talk as we do this.
Okay.
But if you guys are looking to try this, you can say the word and then open Bamboo Learning. And, that'll get you right in. Yeah,
no, it's great. And, try it with your kids, send us feedback. We didn't emphasize that there's visuals in all of our products. We think visuals are important, but the interaction is all via voice. The visuals just enhance everything that kids are doing. So
love it. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Ian. This has been my total pleasure getting to chat with you today.
That's great. I really enjoyed it too. So I guess now the serendipity engine, or no, the context engine is going to set us up for beers at some point automatically.
I think that's lovely. Are you based in Seattle?
Yeah.
All right. I am not, but I'll actually be there next week. So maybe maybe that serendipity engine will make something happen.
Okay. That sounds great.
All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Thanks, Ian, for being here. And we will see you all next week. Take care.